At the very end of Kyla Scanlon's In This Economy, she references a 2022 article written by Derek Thompson concerning something called the abundance agenda. 1 year after the release of In This Economy, Derek Thompson and Ezra Klein publish Abundance. Abundance received flack from the left for being at best misguided and at worst a billionaire-backed centrist agenda to overtake the Democratic Party. One of the things I will praise the book for is addressing the myth of ineffective government, or the belief that government is inherently incompetent. This is contrasted with the inherently efficient market, the private sector led by individuals incentivized toward their own pursuit of societal and technological progress. But beyond essentializing the public and private sector, this misses that 1, government has a much greater scope of power than any individual company, and 2, public resources help build private companies. Thompson and Klein, saying they oppose this myth, diagnose our current governmental problems as an inability to leverage the extent of the federal government's power caused largely by overly burdensome oversight. Their broadest critique of modern progressive politics is the insufficient pace at which government operates because of too many hands in the kitchen. As they say, affluent, stable societies have more negotiations. And this is good. It's democracy. But it also undoubtedly slows the wheels of progress. These negotiators have gained political power through what Klein and Thompson call democracy by lawsuit, bringing about a government committed to the process of democracy more so than the outcomes of it. Combine this with the conservative attack on big government, and you get a self-reinforcing narrative. Government loses some scope of power, it can't do things like it used to. People point to this and say, government is the problem. It's inherently ineffective. Then we turn our attention to the private sector. Our efforts and talents go there. This creates a public-private binary that views the private sector as inherently more effective. Here they quote Stripe CEO Noah Smith. I don't think the ambitious upstarts who go into high-speed rail, in America anyway, are going to have a great time or have much success in convincing their friends to follow them. But even if these attributes were shown to be inherent to government, this public-private hierarchy wouldn't address that government, by fact of its broad scope of power, can do some things better, like investment in basic research and implementation of new technology. The market can't effectively handle these tasks because of the large amount of risk involved. And
what really astonished me about Abundance is how shallow much of the policy analysis is. This is especially concerning given that the book is supposed to be a highbrow, technocratic manifesto for the kind of people who put policy wonk in their social media bios. I was genuinely expecting to see more detail about the effects of some of the policies they are advocating, as well as the details and minutiae of the regulatory environment and the limitations of existing evidence.
And
Big Oil spent $445 million lobbying Trump and Congress. Fossil fuel companies spend heavily on massive disinformation campaigns and fund nonprofit organizations with the express purpose of slowing down the green energy transition while looking like environmental groups. This abundance conversation of oppressive environmental regulations is just completely divorced from reality.
I don't know. It's kind of like having an agenda that's like, what if we did really cool things? And like, why don't we do these cool things? We should do them. And you're like,
Okay, let's take a step back and look at the political spectrum, the right versus left political orientation most of us are familiar with. Let's start with a three-dimensional area with one axis representing economic ideology, one representing social values, and another representing the relative power of government. And yes, for those of you about to comment that this simplifies things, I know, I'm still working on drawing in 4 dimensions. For the economic axis, to the right would be capitalism, to the left, communism. On the social values axis, one end is progressivism, defined by support for issues such as abortion, LGBTQ and BIPOC representation, and equality of religious beliefs. On the other end would be social conservatism, reflected in support for Christianity, the family, patriotism. Finally, on the relative power of government axis, we have more concentrated forms of power going upward and anarchism moving downward. Now, let's simplify this into a 2D plane, partly for simplicity, but also to reflect the state of American politics today. While pro-capitalists don't have to be social conservatives, they tend to be. You could have a progressive capitalist who believes in LGBTQ rights and the free market, for example, but This would be a relatively uncommon political stance at the national level. Likewise, social progressivism tends to align with support for economic allocation by need. We can now simplify this into a single spectrum, since anarchy isn't a major political movement, which isn't to say it shouldn't be, but that's another video. And now we're back to that familiar right-left political distinction. To the right are those who support social conservatism and market-based solutions to our societal problems. To the left are those supporting social progressivism and collectivist reforms. Klein and Thompson supposedly sit somewhere in the center. They're included in the libs that the right speaks of, but they aren't really leftists. They may profess some social progressivism, but this is subservient to their desire to win over capitalists, so they don't really address these issues. The modern Democratic Party, as epitomized best by maybe the Clintons, sits supposedly left of center. But this paradigm is reflective of a prior shift in American politics rightward. We can think of the political viability of ideas as a window. The further you go toward either end, the less likely the idea becomes policy. Modern America's window would look something like this. At the left, you have the Democratic Socialists of America. At the right, you have MAGA, a once more far-right strand of conservatism starting to take on more of the Republican base. Modern Democrats sit more at the center, and positions like Klein and Thompson's, spoken of as centrists, sit right of center. This rightward shift of political thought is largely due to the rise of neoliberalism in the 70s. Liberalism here is not referring to liberals in the modern political lexicon, but instead classical liberalism, the philosophy that arose with the thinking of John Locke and others during the Enlightenment. Neoliberalism takes the classical liberal ideas of individual rights and applies them to a political economic platform: deregulation, privatization, and market-based solutions for all societal issues. Neoliberalism was in part a response to New Deal Keynesian economics, and sought to unleash what it believed to be the productive powers of capitalism. It's maybe best epitomized by the trickle-down economics agenda. So what Thompson and Klein are trying to do with aBUndAnCe really is capture the Democrats who sit just left of them and the Republicans just right of them to build a base in opposition to the even further right MAGA Republicans. The two do challenge the neoliberal belief in ineffective government, but they don't seem to want to fully unleash the power of the federal government. Instead, their utopian vision is that in 20 years, Amazon, Ozempic, and AI, or at least the technology that these forces represent, will save us if helped along by the federal government. They're somewhat dismissive of wealth redistribution, and they criticize the Democrat Party's continued focus on social welfare. They think we can beat inequality by inventing our way out of it, rather than focusing on reforming social and economic structures that led to it. They might say something like, if we had more productive stuff, it wouldn't matter if there are billionaires or even trillionaires, everyone could be, in the least, effectively millionaires. This demonstrates their strong belief in technology as a utopian force for fairness. Yet, improvements in technology over the past 200 years, while bringing some benefits to all, haven't addressed healthcare, food, and worker inequities, among others. To think that companies like Amazon, Eli Lilly, or OpenAI are going to be the salvation of the everyday worker is, at best, misguided and probably reflects an alignment with corporate interests. Thompson and Klein recognize that the MAGA right is utilizing a scarcity lens. To make America great again, we need to get rid of the aliens taking our stuff. The ills of our day aren't a loss of faith in what the public can accomplish, it's trans women and Muslims, all those who threaten our heteronormative white Christian values. But these values are just a nostalgic distortion of America's past. We've always been a country of immigrants fleeing religious persecution. We've always said our values lie with the wretched. We've failed many people in this respect, but at least that's what we say we strive for. Thompson and Klein also point out that the mainstream Democratic Party hasn't fought this rise in conservative-led neoliberalism, and so they announced that a new Democratic Party needs to be built, not under a scarcity mindset, but one of abundance. While the dichotomy between abundance and scarcity is enticing, the idea of American abundance doesn't reflect many people's lived realities. Few see this untapped abundance Klein and Thompson refer to because America is, and always has been, inequitable. The left has invariably organized under this recognition, but the Democratic Party departed this camp when neoliberalism came along. The current American left, as represented by the Democratic Socialists of America, is fighting for policies such as national health insurance and higher taxation on the rich, policies the Democrats shied away from. Thompson and Klein, in response to the weakened Democratic Party after the last election, want to pull the party to the right. Their proposals don't really diverge from the popular neoliberal ideology of our time: deregulation and optimistic technological progress, just with more government backing it. This growth mindset puts Thompson and Klein at odds with those calling for degrowth. While I don't think the degrowth movement is a viable political platform for the Democratic Party, I do align with its skepticism towards growing our way to prosperity. It's a common talking point that the comforts of modernity were brought about by the technological progress of the Industrial Revolution. Yet this perspective omits the importance of slavery and exploited labor at the foundation of industrialization. Thompson and Klein correctly point out that regulation stands in the way of technological progress, but that's because regulation checks the power of both business and government to overrun what they see as capital, workers, and the environment. Yes, regulation slows projects, but for good reasons. This isn't to say all regulation is good or that America couldn't use a trimming of some of its regulation, but to identify it as the primary obstacle that the left faces towards accomplishing its goals would be odd for a party ostensibly sympathetic with leftist causes. Klein and Thompson try to earn some points by appealing to the left's love of Marx, referencing a passage reflecting Marx's belief in the potential for growth post-capitalism. Yet Simone Weil, writing during the rise of Nazism and Stalinism, recognized the folly of this endless pursuit of growth in both capitalist and communist societies, critiquing Marx herself. All religions make man into a mere instrument of providence, and socialism too puts men at the service of historical progress. That is to say, of productive progress. It's hard to say where Kyla Scanlon would stand on all this. She referenced Thompson and the abundance agenda in her work, but that was right before abundance became the catchphrase it is now. Scanlon brings a more progressive perspective than I've seen most economists bring, so I'm looking to her to reconcile the benefits of economic insight with its tendency to side with the market. And what about abundance? I think there are some points we can take, like how we frame the effectiveness of government, but we shouldn't look to the movement as one the Democratic Party should adopt. It's clear that Klein and Thompson believe, or at least say they believe, that everyone will benefit from an abundance agenda, but the abundance of the past 200 years doesn't support that. We already have examples of politicians and policies with mainstream support that the Democratic Party can and should back. The bigger question is, will the moneyed interests currently at play in the party allow that to happen?